Good evening and welcome back. Today I will be going in depth on 4 of history's biggest mysteries. Before we begin, I know you may be using this video to fall asleep, so before that, make sure to like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this content. Now, get comfortable, relax, and let's begin. Off the storm-swept shores of 16th century North Carolina, a young English settlement vanished without a trace, leaving behind a single carved word and centuries of speculation. Imagine yourself aboard a creaking galleon in the summer of 1587, sails billowed by a languid Atlantic breeze that carries aromas of wet rope, salt, and distant pine resin. Sir Walter Raleigh's grand design, blessed by an aware but cautious Queen Elizabeth, breathes through every plank, for the vessel is not merely reaching a coastline, it is chasing a realm of imagined abundance. Gentle waves slap the hull in slow percussion, and the colonists, a mosaic of carpenters, farmers, soldiers, and dreamers, lean against the rails, eyeing a dim horizon that promises redemption from crowded English streets. Above them, gulls circle patiently, as though guardians ushering a fragile hope across an indifferent ocean. Dawn arrives on the barrier island with an opalescent hush, and the newcomers step onto sand that feels cool beneath worn boots, while the sea exhales over and over like a vast, slumbering creature behind them. Pungent seagrass and wax myrtle perfume the breeze, mingling with smoke from breakfast fires where salted pork and peas simmer in iron pots. In the near distance, longleaf pines stand like silent sentinels, their needles catching first light and releasing beads of resinous scent that drift inland. Already wooden frames rise from cleared patches, joining mallet taps with the steady beat of surf in a gentle chorus of intention. While breakfasts simmer, Governor John White walks a measured circuit along the temporary palisade, mindful of more than hunger. Across the Atlantic, Spain commands treasure convoys and bristles at English footholds, so every hammer stroke and every garden furrow carries political weight. Investors in London dream of precious metals, exotic dyes, and fragrant sassafras, yet the loamy sand yields mostly corn, beans, and the brittle promise of tobacco seedlings. White notes each observation in a little bound journal, aware that his words may serve as both ledger and epitaph. Beyond the clearing, Algonquian villages rest along clear estuaries where fish shimmer beneath reeds like moving coins. Occasional emissaries paddle painted canoes to the settlement, offering baskets of maize and gourds in cautious trade for copper trinkets and tiny mirrors that flash in the sun. Dialogues unfold through broken phrases and graceful gestures, the rhythm of their lives revealed in gentle smiles, wary pauses, and the reverent way they touch the earth before boarding their boats. Each meeting teaches the colonists a fragment of local wisdom, and each fragment glints like mica scattered in the sandy banks. Evenings settle slowly, and the colonists gather around a central fire that pulses like a steady heartbeat, its glow gilding rough timber walls, while gentle sparks drift toward constellations already familiar from English nights. Murmured discussions wander through the mellow light, touching on letters left behind, hopes for heavy harvests, and the lingering question of when a resupply vessel will appear. Children dart after ashes as if they were glowing insects, their laughter easing tension etched into adult faces, while musicians scrape tentative melodies on fiddles carried across the sea. Yet beneath the tranquil surface, slow-moving worries creep. Clouds brush the island without releasing rain, leaving barrels slack and the gardens cracked along delicate seams. Mosquitoes drift in restless circles, their plaintive hum threading each humid night. Unfamiliar shapes stir cedar thickets at dusk, unsettling sentries who grip matchlocks and murmur quiet psalms. Grain stores are modest, and bouts of fever drift through camp like a chill tide, reminding all that oceans are tedious to cross and still more difficult to call back across. Even in whispered prayer, the word providence hovers, fragile as the fireflies that scatter into the enveloping darkness. Despite these shadows, dawn always follows, brushing pale gold across pine trunks and placid lagoons. Roosters sound from makeshift coops, and nets arc into the shimmering sound where silver mullet flash in scattered plumes. Any wisp of smoke on the horizon holds its own question. A friendly campfire, a Spanish caravel, or the long-awaited silhouette of an English pinnace. In that hush, the colony breathes as a singular living thing, trusting that shared labor and steadfast resolve will transform uncertainty into settlement, and settlement into legacy, even as unseen currents of fate begin to coil beyond the cordgrass marshes, silent and patient as the tide itself. These first days on Roanoke are therefore remembered less for the enigma they will one day wear, and more for the steady simplicity of planting, mapping, and noting. Each stroke of ink in John White's log, each cedar stake pressed into sandy soil, each measured greeting with local chieftains appears an ordinary motion of settlement. In retrospect, those mundane gestures carry a muted rhythm of anticipation, like a drum quietly warmed before a ceremony yet to be proclaimed. History often hides portent in routine, and within these routines, seeds of wonder and tragedy alike quietly germinate, awaiting a season only fate can declare. Late in the summer of 1587, Governor John White stands upon the sandy quay and feels the tide creep around his boots, while a hush settles over the settlement behind him. Boards creak and gulls quarrel overhead, yet the air seems heavy with unspoken understanding. Supplies are dwindling, and tensions with local groups have grown brittle around the edges of goodwill. London has promised more grain, more tools, and skilled artisans, and so with reluctance, White consents to sail home for relief. Imagine yourself watching from the shoreline, the breeze carrying briny mist across your cheeks as the shallop ferries the governor toward a waiting pinnace that rocks in the surf, its canvas already trimmed for departure. Colonists raise subdued farewells, trusting that within months tall masts will reappear upon the horizon, laden with bread, powder, and measured optimism. The governor departs in company with 2 vessels cleared to collect booty from Spanish shipping, a compromise that grants the crown its share while granting White his passage. Atlantic winds push the little squadron eastward under low clouds that blur the seam between sky and water, and the days unfold at the slow rhythm of rope being coiled and uncoiled. Between meals of salted fish and ship biscuit, the governor prepares careful inventories, tools requested by joiners, seeds craved by farmers, lace coveted by merchants' wives, each item a promise pressed between salt-stained pages. Night after night, he leans against a damp rail and studies the waxing moon, whispering that same promise into the rolling swell, confident he will return before infant Virginia dare speaks her first full sentence. Yet, upon landing in Plymouth, White walks into a realm of thunderous politics. News fills every tavern that King Philip of Spain is gathering a mighty armada, and English harbors bristle with pressed ships and newly cast cannon. Queen Elizabeth declares that no vessel of worth shall sail for distant colonies, while the homeland itself stands exposed to invasion. Thus the promised resupply sits idle along muddy quays, barrels of meal sweating beneath tar-soaked awnings, while White paces corridors of the Privy Council pleading for permit after permit. Imagine yourself tracing his steps through narrow stone passages lit by tallow tapers, their smoke drifting upward like muted sighs, each clerk he meets offering soft words of sympathy, yet no precious parchment of clearance. Months melt into a full year, and the Armada finally comes like dark thunder across the Channel, only to be driven back by fire ships and a capricious storm the English later call their Protestant wind. Dockyards erupt in cautious celebration. Yet timber is scarce, and men are fewer, lost to battle or pressed into other expeditions. White secures 2 small pinnaces at the mouth of the Thames, privately funded craft whose captains value quick profit above royal obligation, and he loads them with livestock, seed grain, and a smattering of pewter gifts for native allies. In May of 1588, the little expedition slips downriver, only to be struck by an early summer gale that smashes masts and ruins barrels, forcing a limping return to port and another season of waiting. While England wrestles with war and whether the settlement on Roanoke drifts through its own uneasy calendar, contemporary letters carried later to Europe claim the colonists conserved powder by hunting with snares and sharpened staves, and exchanged copper trinkets for maize when the cornfields failed under relentless summer heat. Alliances with the Croatoan community flicker between warmth and distrust, shaped by fever tales and the mysterious loss of a silver cup, blamed first on friends, then on invisible thieves. Evenings find the settlers gathered near the palisade, watching the sun sink behind cypress silhouettes, and each fading band of crimson reminds them that another day has passed without sight of English sails, while the chorus of tree frogs swells like a distant choir, singing only of patience. Back in London, White becomes both supplicant and storyteller, attending smoky rooms where financiers run quills, across ledgers calculating returns that have yet to blossom. He unrolls rough sketches of the Carolina coastline, tracing hidden inlets with an ivory-tipped pointer, describing soils rich enough for grapes and suggesting strands of pearl along secret rivers. At private dinners, he lowers his voice and speaks of Spanish proximity, stirring a patriotic chord designed to loosen purses, for a fortified colony might blunt Iberian ambition and safeguard Protestant influence. Imagine yourself at that table, candlelight wavering upon pewter goblets and roasted venison, while the governor's calm voice threads through the clatter and perfume, never pleading, yet always conveying gentle urgency for those waiting beyond the sea. At last, in early 1590, a consortium of merchants grants White passage aboard the Lion, a trim bark armed with 12 guns and commanded by Captain Abraham Coke, who views the venture as both duty and wager. They depart Plymouth amid a muted fanfare of gull cries and brass trumpet, sails swelling white beneath gentle breeze. The deck crowded with goats, pigs, and crates of hardware. During quiet evenings, White reviews a letter penned to his daughter Eleanor, folded so many times its creases resemble fine veins across a weathered map, and he pictures her bending over a low cradle, humming to the infant born beneath Carolina stars. The Atlantic seems placid, yet every squall carries the whisper of records unfinished, and each roll of the ship rocks the ink bottle beside him like a small, impatient heart. Weeks later, the Lion sights the pale sandbars of Cape Hatteras, shining beneath a late summer sun. White's journal notes, low breakers, and scattered smoke rising from interior islands, though distance conceals whether cook fire or signal. He orders a longboat lowered, and while sailors make ready, he writes a final entry addressed to no one in particular, remarking upon the gentle roll of the tide and the reassuring cry of terns that wheel overhead. Imagine yourself seated beside him on the aft locker, ink pen scratching softly as gulls drift past like slips of parchment, unaware that the next landfall will stir questions that ripple across centuries. With that quiet signature, the daily record closes, leaving historians a last measured heartbeat before the hush that meets the expedition ashore. Morning mist clings to the Roanoke shore as the long boat from the Lion slides into the quiet inlet, oars rising and falling with a restrained hush softer than the outer surf. Governor White steps onto pale sand that once quivered beneath lively footsteps and feels a stillness too complete for ordinary dawn. Smoke from cooking fires ought to coil above the palisade, greeting the expedition with the scent of maize cakes, yet the sky remains an unbroken blue. Beach grass leans under a mild breeze, and the narrow path toward the fort shows only wind-sculpted ridges and tiny crab prints, as though all heavier traffic has been lifted away by the same unseen tide that removed the settlers from this place. Passing through the wooden gate, White finds the enclosure perfectly arranged, yet strangely devoid of life. Garden plots are edged with neat cedar stakes, but only desiccated corn stalks remain, their husks rattling faintly as if whispering reluctant farewells. Doors of timber cabins hang open, letting sunlight spill across interiors where hearth ash lies cold and gray. Brass utensils gleam upon a table, as though washed and set aside after a final meal, and a child's cloth doll rests on a stool embroidered with fading flowers. A single beeswax candle, untouched and whole, stands in a clay holder beside it, its wick waiting for a flame that never arrived. Near the entrance, a sturdy oak post draws attention, for it bears one carved word, Croton, letters deep and steady, as if etched during a quiet evening when patience was still abundant. Farther down, a weather-bent tree near the lagoon carries only the letters CRO, their grooves shallow and abrupt, as though the carver had been interrupted. Before departing, White instructed the colonists to record any relocation and to add a cross. If danger pressed upon them, no such cross greets him, and the message therefore hints at a movement carried out under minimal threat, most likely toward the friendly people on distant Hatteras. Yet the stark brevity feels unsettling, an unfinished sentence left hanging between two worlds. White next studies the palisade itself. Earth at its base reveals no heaving, and cedar posts stand plumb with bark unscarred, suggesting the fort never faced assault. Inside, storage sheds sit open yet meticulously arranged, maize bins swept clean, barrels rolled aside to dry, and tools stacked with their iron edges oiled. Window shutters appear to have been secured from within, then lifted free with patience rather than haste. In one cabin, quills and spare parchment remain, but the inkhorn is gone, as if the diarist planned to write elsewhere. On the doorpost, someone has drawn a small circle enclosing a star, perhaps a private blessing, now fading beneath salt wind. As the day lengthens, the search parties wander through reed-choked creeks and crabapole thickets where cicadas were in warm light. They uncover old cooking pits ringed by oyster shells bleached white, and farther inland they come upon a half-built shallop resting on seasoned timbers, its ribs lashed yet still awaiting planks. No shattered musket lies among the nettles, no powder stains darken the ground, yet not a single settler answers the governor's call. The silence wears the shape of absence rather than violence, a widening space that swallows every greeting and returns only the distant murmur of tide beyond the dunes. Even the gulls seem to refrain from calling, as though recognizing a border between what once bustled with life and what now lies paused in perpetual interlude. That evening, White remains within the vacant fort and lights a small oil lamp from the communal storehouse, its flame fluttering against rough pine walls and breathing mellow gold across his journal page. He records every detail with measured strokes, from the orderly removal of supplies to the enigmatic carvings to the curious quiet of livestock pens. The steadiness of his script disguises a tremor within his hand and conceals the image of his granddaughter, now 3 years old, yet unseen. He notes that the absence of violence points toward relocation, advises a prompt sail south, and listens while night insects fade beneath gathering clouds. Far out on the Sound, a thunderhead flashes, illuminating the marsh in silent silver bursts that echo his unsettled mind. The next dawn brings a stiffening wind that hammers waves over the shoals, and Captain Cope refuses to risk the smaller craft until calmer water returns. Provisions already run thin, and several crewmen cough with damp fever, pressing the reluctant choice to turn for England before autumn storms build. White stands on the quarterdeck, watching shore and forest retreat into a hazy smear beneath low clouds, and the hush that cloaked the empty fort seems to trail the Lion across the ocean. In London, the story spreads through coffee houses where pamphleteers debate Spanish raids, mysterious plague, or mutiny. Yet amid all conjecture, one simple fact endures. The settlers carved a single word and then vanished with the tide. In the gentle glow of a Carolina dawn, modern archaeologists kneel where the old palisade once stood and let sifted grains tumble through steady fingers, each particle an unspoken syllable from a vanished narrative. Ground-penetrating radar hums with a soft rhythm that blends with cicada song, while subtle color shifts in the sand reveal post molds, hearth pits, and the faint imprint of a garden row. Among the findings rests a wrought iron hook, oxidized yet intact, its curve suggestive of barrels once swung from rafters. Nearby, a green-tinted glass bead emerges, still gleaming in the sun, silently affirming commerce between settlers and coastal tribes. Every recovered fragment, no matter how small, feels like a whispered greeting across 4 centuries, assuring the listener that the colonists were here, that they tasted this same salt air, and that their choices are etched beneath the surface, awaiting careful translation. Imagine yourself in a laboratory lined with cedar cabinets, where tree slices from ancient pines lie numbered on linen cloths. Under a warm lamp, each ring shows a fine variation in width, some broad with generous rainfall, others narrow with prolonged drought. Dendrochronologists compare these rings to a master timeline and discover that the summers bracketing 1587 were parched, offering little relief to fields already rooted in porous sand. Such conditions would have strained food stores, heightened tensions in trade negotiations, and nudged weary settlers toward distant islands where streams ran clearer. The rings speak with quiet certainty, offering not conjecture but physical memory, a record of the sky itself pressing upon human plans. In their muted language, we sense the colonists scanning brittle corn leaves and listening to wells run low, deciding on a journey born of thirst and necessity rather than sudden violence. South of the Cape, elders of the Lumbee Nation gather beneath moss-draped oaks and recount lineage stories passed from early tongues to present-day hearts. They speak of pale-skinned cousins arriving with tools of bright metal, blending families through marriage and adopting the dialects of the coastal peoples. Recorded in journals of later explorers are glimpses of gray-eyed children fluent in Algonquian speech, guiding traders through marsh and bay. Oral memory describes the planting of European grains beside native squash, the sharing of songs under expansive night skies, and the slow weaving of two cultures into one resilient thread. These accounts, recited in measured cadence, fill archival halls with the soft cadence of lived experience, offering an intimate counterpoint to silent artifacts and distant papers, inviting listeners to recognize the possibility that disappearance may sometimes mean transformation rather than erasure. Along a tranquil bend of Salmon Creek, researchers recently explored what they call Site X, a cluster of soil stains and pottery shards shaded by tall tulip poplars. Here they uncovered a brass clasp traced to Elizabethan workshops and a slate writing tablet etched with faint lines of Latin script. Radiocarbon readings from charcoal fragments align with the closing decades of the 16th century, hinting that at least a portion of the colony resettled inland, leveraging deeper soils and reliable fresh water. Survey drones drift overhead like patient gulls, mapping subsurface anomalies that suggest palisade corners and workshop floors. Each discovery is cataloged with quiet reverence, then wrapped in acid-free paper before the afternoon breeze can scatter unrecorded truths. In these woods, the rhythm of their lives resumes through spear points shaped from recycled iron and shallow cellars dug to store unfamiliar winter roots, all whispering that survival often follows uncharted rivers. Even the frontier of genetic inquiry joins the dialogue. Researchers conduct careful sampling among coastal families whose surnames echo Elizabethan parish rolls, searching for chromosomal markers that might bridge oceans and centuries. The quest remains preliminary, bound by consent protocols and the delicate ethics of identity. Yet early patterns reveal tantalizing overlaps in mitochondrial sequences. Isotope analysis of recovered tooth enamel hints at childhood spent near brackish sounds rather than the deep Atlantic, reinforcing the theory of migration rather than annihilation. Still, every promising data point pauses before the same polite curtain of uncertainty, a reminder that history guards many thresholds and invites patience more often than finality. The mystery persists, not as a gaping void, but as a gentle tide, retreating when pursued, yet returning to lap at the curious mind with every new season of study. So we linger at the edge of Roanoke, listening to reeds sway and herons lift in slow ascent, acknowledging that some questions may remain companions rather than problems to solve. The carved word, the drought rings, the Lumbee memories, and the inland hearths together form a quiet tapestry, soothing in its complexity, calming in its resistance to hurried answers. As evening settles, moonlight strokes the abandoned posts with pale silver, and the Atlantic murmurs the same patient syllables it offered the settlers long ago. Their footsteps may lie scattered or merged, yet the rhythm of their hope still pulses in shifting sands, ready to lull every attentive ear toward reflective rest. With that gentle cadence, we close this chapter and prepare to drift across another calm sea toward the next quiet enigma that waits within the fold of history. Next, we will discuss the ghost ship, Mary Celeste. In December 1872, the brigantine Mary Celeste was found adrift on the Atlantic, sails billowing, crew gone, cargo intact, prompting maritime lore that endures to this day. Imagine yourself on a cool November morning in 1872, walking along the quiet wharves of New York Harbor, where wooden pilings drip with briny beads and gulls call in languid arcs above sleeping warehouses. The brigantine Mary Celeste rests at her moorings, a modest 282 tons of seasoned oak, her hull brushed with a faded coat of black that reflects shifting ripples like obsidian scales. Light fog drifts between rigging lines, muting the clink of iron cleats and the soft murmur of stevedores stacking casks along the quay. Nearby, the East River breathes a gentle rhythm, drawing the scent of salt and pine tar through the early light, and for a moment the vessel seems neither restless nor proud, only patient. Captain Benjamin Briggs arrives with deliberate calm, his dark beard trimmed, eyes clear, and posture upright from 2 decades of Atlantic crossings. Beside him walks his young wife, Sarah, shawl wrapped close against the harbor chill, and a little distance behind them their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia, toddles, her small boots tapping the damp planks in steady curiosity. Briggs pauses at the gangway and lifts the child with practiced ease, placing her gently upon the quarterdeck where the polished wheel stands like a guardian circle of seasoned tick. The crew offers subtle nods, a shared respect for a master who balances duty with quiet domestic warmth. Below deck, the cargo hold yawns under dim lantern glow, stacked with 1,700 wooden barrels of industrial alcohol bound for Genoese factories. Each cask, branded with black stenciled numerals, carries a faint aroma of sharp spirits that mingles with the deeper scent of oak staves soaked from earlier voyages. White canvas-wrapped bundles of navigation charts lie secured near the bulkhead, while crates of sewing machines and medicinal drums rest against a central beam, testimony to the varied appetites of Mediterranean markets. The brigantine rides high despite the freight, her bilges dry, her ballast trimmed for a steady gait across winter seas. On the main deck, the mate, Albert Richardson, calls the crew of 7 to ready the sails. Blocks creak softly as buntlines ease, and sheets slide through experienced hands with a hiss like sand over stone. Sailcloth, recently patched where gulls once pecked idle holes, billows in slow surrender to a mild westerly. The ship's chronometer ticks within the cabin at a measured pace, marking longitude with patient clicks, while Captain Briggs records noon temperature, barometer reading, and wind direction in a small leather log. Each entry folds neatly into the daily rhythm of seamanship, a ritual as reassuring as the tide. By early afternoon, the Mary Celeste drifts past Governor's Island, her bowsprit pointing toward the open Atlantic, where gentle swells glisten beneath slate-colored sky. The bark de Gradia, still loading wheat upriver, appears briefly through mist like a distant sibling. Unaware, it will soon weave into the same story. From the forecastle comes the low hum of a sailor's hymn, carrying verses of safe passage and starlit guidance. Words smoothed by generations, yet still soft enough to soothe a wary heart. Sarah Briggs settles Sophia in the airy cabin aft, where sunlight slips through a round porthole and paints shifting rings upon a woolen blanket. Evening stretches, violet shadows across the rolling horizon, and the brigantine adopts her night routine. Lamps swing gently on brass gimbals, casting warm halos upon polished pine paneling, while the cook ladles a modest stew of pork and hardtack into tin bowls. The crew eats in easy silence, broken only by occasional remarks about distant storms or markets teeming with citrus and silk. Above, the stars emerge, one by one, bright and calm, and Captain Briggs aligns his sextant to the subtle glint of Capella, before returning below to mark their first latitude toward the Azores. In his log he notes a favorable wind and the promise of an uneventful crossing, unaware that these pages will soon end mid-sentence, leaving future readers adrift among unanswered lines. For now, the vessel glides forward with quiet confidence, her canvas full, her keel humming through gentle troughs, and the rhythm of their lives aboard settles into soft equilibrium. The Atlantic whispers against the planks, timbers breathe with each roll, and somewhere in that muted concert the Mary Celeste carries a secret only the sea will witness, patiently waiting for dawns not yet written. Early on a chilled afternoon in December, the bark Dei Gratia drifts across a calm Atlantic south of the Azores, her lookout framed against a pale sky that shimmers like brushed pewter. He spots a distant sail slipping across the horizon at a curious angle, canvas set but movements sluggish, as though the helmsman dozes rather than steers. Captain David Morehouse studies the stranger through a brass telescope, noting that the ship answers no signal and its foresail hangs in odd, sagging folds. Low swells slap gently against the hull, and an almost cathedral stillness seems to cloak the scene, as though the ocean itself holds breath and waits. After measured deliberation, Morehouse orders a small boat, readied oars, carefully wrapped in tarred cloth to muffle each dip. Imagine yourself seated amidships of that boat. Spray whispers across weathered planks, and the only sound beyond the steady row is a faint creak of distant rigging moving without command. Drawn closer, the boarding crew reads the name Mary Celeste painted in flaking white upon a stern that rises in slow heave. The vessel rides higher than her tonnage suggests, and her jibs flutter loose, yet no figure leans upon the rail. No lantern glows under the break of the poop, and no friendly hail drifts across the narrowing distance. The brig appears held in a gentle spell, suspended between wakefulness and slumber under one winter light. First Officer Oliver DeVoe scrambles up the deserted chains and steps onto the main deck, where recent rain has left small beads gleaming along the scuppers. A ship's bell hangs silent, its clapper still, and a half-finished coil of line rests near the capstan, as though dropped only moments before by unseen hands. He notes that the wheel is lashed, spokes fixed square upon a southwesterly heading, and a binnacle lamp stands unlit, though its reservoir brims with clear oil. The canvas above sways with each timid gust, producing a soft sigh that echoes through empty companionways. Devo calls out once, voice calm yet firm, and it vanishes into the vacant corridors without reply. Below decks, he passes through the companionway, where brass hinges shine, and finds the saloon tidy porcelain cups aligned upon a walnut shelf. A sewing machine anchored against the bulkhead with its needle poised midway through a cotton hem. Sarah Briggs's cloak hangs neatly on a hook beside a child's shoe that lies on its side, as if placed down during a playful pause. A faint odor of alcohol fumes mingles with the usual mix of hemp cloth and beeswax, hinting at evaporating cargo, yet not enough to alarm. Water sloshes ankle-deep in the hold, but the bilge pumps sit idle, their handles secured, suggesting that ingress has been measured and recently supervised. On the mess table, Devo discovers Captain Briggs's logbook open to an entry dated 10 days earlier. Latitude near the northern Azores, notation precise yet unremarkable. barometer steady. Charts remain pinned with drawing compasses set to the next intended bearing. Quills carefully capped, the ink pot full. In the galley, a kettle, empty now, hangs over a cold iron stove, and a loaf of bread wrapped in muslin rests untouched upon a chopping board, its crust only beginning to harden. Nothing speaks of fear, nothing hints at hurried flight. Instead, the remnants of ordinary routine linger like gentle echoes, still humming beneath a silent layer of salt spray. Having searched cabins, forecastle, and lazarette, the boarding party assembles once more on deck, the quiet broken only by the rhythmic clack of the loose forehatch nudging its sill. They confirm that 6 months of provisions remain, charts are intact, and the lone lifeboat is missing from its stern davits. The chronometer has stopped, but other instruments sit ready for use. Sextant safely stowed in a mahogany case lined with green felt. It is as though crew and passengers stepped over one invisible threshold into open air, carrying minimal essentials, then allowed the ship to wander on a loyal heading without them. No struggle, no spill, only absence, wrapped in flawless order. Captain Morehouse confers with Devo beneath a twilight sky graduating from lavender to deep indigo, stars pricking through one by one in silent witness. The decision to divide crews follows calmly. De Gratia will escort Mary Celeste to Gibraltar for salvage adjudication. A journey of slow days and colder nights, sails reefed to spare spars from sudden squalls. Lanterns are lit on both decks, and 2 ships glide side by side across moonlit water, their wakes glimmering like twin ribbons leading toward a distant coastline where legal chambers will soon echo with quiet testimony. For now, every creak of plank, every sigh of wind through loose sheets accompanies the mystery afloat, soothing and persistent, inviting the curious mind to drift like the vessels themselves into wide contemplative spaces. Gibraltar greets the Mary Celeste on a pale December morning, mist curled around limestone slopes, while Royal Navy signal flags flap with restrained curiosity. Health officers board first, clipboards in gloved hands, confirming that no passenger or crew remains to request quarantine. Customs clerks shuffle stacks of parchment across mahogany desks, listing 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol, 3 sewing machines, and a marble-topped harmonium case. Each item tallied with quiet precision. They note the shaded calm of the cabins, the absence of violence, and the curious height of the water in the bilge. Within hours, the Admiralty Court summons Captain Morehouse and his men to swear depositions, setting in motion a formal process that will sift every detail through the fine mesh of maritime law. Presiding over the inquiry is Attorney General Frederick Solly Flood, a man whose spectacles glint beneath gas lamps as if reflecting both skepticism and storm lantern glare. He listens to DeVoe describe the tidy galley, the child's shoe, and the latched wheel, then raises one eyebrow at the missing chronometer and lifeboat. Flood's questions flow in calm cadence, yet carry barbed implications. Did the crew of De Gratia perhaps overstate the derelict state of the brigantine to secure a generous salvage? Could Captain Briggs have staged his own disappearance for insurance gain? The witness list lengthens, encompassing sailors, dockworkers, and Lloyd's surveyors who measure hatchboards and sniff cask bungs for any trace of purposeful tampering. Outside the granite courthouse, reporters gather under felt hats, their notebooks filling with phrases designed to ignite distant newsstands. London broadsheets speak of phantoms stalking the North Atlantic. Boston periodicals muse over sea-going marauders. and one Paris feuilleton proposes that pirates left lace curtains undisturbed as deliberate mockery. Headlines ripple across continents faster than any wind could carry sail, painting the Mary Celeste in hues of dread and wonder. Hotel parlors buzz with talk of foul play, yet each retelling drifts further from the dry facts recorded in logbooks and sworn testimony, proving that mystery has a fragrance strong enough to mask even the sharp scent of rectified spirits. Insurance agents arrive next, assessing liability with calm detachment. The cargo, valued at over $35,000, remains mostly intact, yet leakage from several casks suggests expansion due to temperature swings. Some experts claim alcohol vapor could have created an explosive illusion, a muffled boom or sudden puff powerful enough to compel a cautious captain to order temporary evacuation to the yawl. Others counter that brigs would never abandon a sound ship without clear peril. Underwriters haggle over salvage percentage, and after weeks of argument, the court awards Morehouse a modest £1,800, far below the customary share, an unspoken verdict that mystery still casts shadow upon claims of honest service. Throughout proceedings, the late Captain Briggs receives both defense and suspicion. Former shipmates submit letters describing a calm master who read scripture at dawn, wrote affectionate notes to his parents, and maintained an immaculate deck. Fellow captains attest that Sarah enjoyed needlework beside the binnacle, and that Sophia toddled among coils of line under watchful eyes. Yet pamphleteers whisper of secret cargo, clandestine meetings with brigands, and invisible stowaways who surfaced only when the brigantine slipped past the Azores. The gulf between courtroom record and tavern gossip widens, offering listeners a tranquil eddy in which imagination may drift as freely as any abandoned yawl. Gentler voices surface, too. One clerk in the registry office writes an anonymous editorial urging readers to remember that ocean travel often swallows lives without storm or villain, citing icebergs, sudden squalls, and silent disease. He notes that mystery itself can be a kindly cloak, sparing families the sharper edge of known torment. His words find limited audience among headlines filled with bolder conjecture, yet they remain in archive boxes.com and steady, waiting for curious scholars to unfold them on quiet evenings when the scent of fading ink can settle the mind like distant surf. Years later, the writer Arthur Conan Doyle pens a tale inspired by the case, embellishing events with West African mutineers and occult charms. Though offered as fiction, the story renews public fascination, ensuring that each retelling drifts a little farther from Gibraltar's hushed courtrooms. Spiritualist circles claim the crew ascended through a thinning veil between worlds, while pragmatic engineers propose rogue waves, massed failures, or secrets. The real evidence, stored in leather-bound ledgers, rests undisturbed beneath a film of archive dust, its pages still, its ink unchanging, much like the abandoned plates set upon the Mary Celeste mess table so many winters ago. Thus, the paper trail stretches, gentle yet persistent, across maritime offices, newsrooms, and private diaries, inviting steady contemplation rather than hurried judgment. In its measured cadence, we sense both the rigor of inquiry and the pliancy of speculation. Two currents meeting in a quiet confluence that rocks the mind into reflective ease. From here, we drift naturally toward the realm of modern science, where fresh instruments and careful simulations attempt to hush the whispering rigging with sober analysis. though even the sharpest sensor must still navigate the soft waters of human wonder. Long after the Admiralty Court adjourns, the Mary Celeste continues to drift through the collective imagination, inviting scholars, mariners, and quiet night readers to settle into armchairs and trace slow circles across a chart-room globe. Early conjecture favors the drama of mutiny or piracy, yet careful arithmetic shows no jewel nor coin removed, and every personal heirloom still resting in tidy drawers. Insurance fraud receives equal scrutiny, only to falter beneath the spotless reputation of Captain Briggs and the modest salvage award that follows his absence. Thus, the narrative relaxes into a gentler exploration of circumstance, encouraging reflection rather than accusation, and the rhythm of inquiry begins to lull like low surf against a quiet breakwater. One enduring explanation rests upon the cargo itself. 1,700 barrels of raw alcohol, corked in white oak, yet prone to gentle seepage as Atlantic temperatures rise. Chemists propose that vapor accumulated within the dark hold until a cask band snapped, sending a faint puff through hatch seams, a breath felt more than heard. Captain Briggs, cautious of open flames near invisible fumes, may have ordered hatches opened and passengers guided to the yawl for a brief respite. A sudden breeze could then have pushed the unweighted brigantine onward, leaving the yawl adrift beyond reach. Sailors who test the theory in modern laboratories ignite butane within glass chambers and watch a cap release with a silent flash of pressure. No fire, only a swift gust that startles, yet leaves no scorch behind, mirroring the pristine timbers found by De Gratia. Nature also offers quiet counsel through the possibility of waterspout or seaquake. Meteorologists note that slender columns of spinning spray can strike without warning, tossing spars and jangling rigging with a violence that suggests imminent capsize, while leaving hull and canvas visually unscarred. Seismologists describe submarine tremors that travel silently, lifting a gentle swell into a fleeting crest, able to sweep decks clean. In either event, a protective captain might guide family and crew into the yawl until the agitation passes, unaware that fresh wind will soon press square sails and widen the gap minute by minute. The ocean then resumes its steady pulse, as indifferent to the separation as it is to gulls that follow ships for crumbs. A more technical lens focuses on the ship's pump. Surveyors in Gibraltar discover its components partly disassembled, suggesting recent maintenance. Perhaps Briggs perceived the bilge water as deeper than it truly was, deceived by distorted sounding rods tapping against slack barrels. If he feared structural weakness, a brief evacuation would again appear prudent. Modern recreations in cold wave pools demonstrate how a shallow pool of water sloshing across shifting ballast can mimic the disquieting thud of a fractured keel. The yawl, once lowered, would ride low and stable, a comforting platform for a wary commander, until swell or sudden squall pulled towing lines, taut and snapped final contact with the mother ship. Psychologists add another layer, reminding listeners that prolonged vigilance in vast seascapes can shape perception. A captain responsible for both crew and family may interpret every creak through a lens of heightened caution, rendering minor anomalies into portents. Subtle dizziness from ethanol vapor mixed with humid cabin air could amplify unease, nudging decisions toward collective safety. Such reasoning neither condemns nor exalts. It merely sketches the quiet burdens carried by those who guide lives across liquid frontiers, burdens often invisible within courtroom transcripts, yet palpable in the hush that lingered aboard the empty brigantine. Contemporary explorers revisit the mystery with sonar arrays and remotely piloted submersibles, scanning depths near Santa Maria in hope of locating an aged yawl preserved in cool sediment. Data scrolls across monitors in dim control rooms where only worry fans disturb the stillness. So far, the seabed keeps its counsel, showing ridges of basalt and drifts of pumice, but no precise outline of Victorian planking. Geneticists trace descendants of the crew, confirming lineages, yet finding no diary or whispered legend that fills the void. Each field of study contributes a measured note to what has become a gentle maritime fugue, a composition built upon pauses as much as sound. In the end, the Mary Celeste rests in memory much as she was found, sails eased, wheels secured, galley neat, and logbook abruptly silent. Her story comforts the listening mind with the possibility that some questions may remain softly open, inviting speculation without demanding conclusion. As the Atlantic night spreads a blanket of stars across calm water, imagine yourself on her deserted deck, feeling the vessel breathe with each slow swell, aware that mystery can soothe as surely as certainty, easing thoughts into quieter channels. In that tranquility, we furl the canvas of this chapter and prepare to let the mind drift toward the next calm enigma waiting just beyond the horizon. Mystery number 3, the encrypted Voynich manuscript. A book of unknown script and botanical fantasies surfaced in 1912 and defies decryption, even in the age of quantum computing. Imagine yourself strolling along a sun-warmed colonnade outside Villa Mondragon in 1912, breathing air that carries mingled notes of laurel, cypress, and distant pastry from a nearby kitchen. Beyond slender arches sits a Jesuit library where thousands of volumes slumber beneath dust motes that drift in languid spirals through angled shafts of afternoon light. Into this hush walks Wilfred Voynich, Polish expatriate and devoted book hunter, his fingertips already tingling with the anticipation of brittle vellum and faded ink. He moves with measured calm among walnut armoires, pausing to open one tall cabinet whose hinges sigh like a tired cello, revealing a slim cedar chest tied shut with frayed cord. The curator murmurs that the chest once belonged to the Collegio Romano, its contents untouched since suppression of the Jesuit order in the previous century. Voynich places the box upon a reading table worn smooth by centuries of contemplative hands and eases away the lid. The scent that escapes is soft but insistent, a blend of papery sweetness and the faint musk of old glue. Inside, beneath a folio of Aristotle and a stack of herbal pamphlets, lies a single volume wrapped in olive green silk. Its cover, of goat leather darkened by age, bears no title and no emblem, only a shallow scar near the spine where a clasp was long ago removed. The cloth rustles like quiet leaves as it falls away, unveiling a mystery that has waited 400 years for daylight. He opens to the first leaf and finds characters unlike any alphabet he knows. Tiny glyphs leaning and looping in rows that flow across creamy parchment with confident grace. Some letters resemble maidenhair fronds. Others recall the rhythm of tidal foam receding from sand. Yet none belong to Latin, Greek, or Arabic. Margins bloom with miniature plants no botanist could name, their roots tangled around star-shaped blossoms and blue-tinted fruit. One page glows with spiral diagrams that call to mind a whirlpool of green moons, while another displays a bathing ritual where unclothed figures stand waist-deep in liquid-tinted turquoise. Voynich, usually poised, feels the subtle rush of discovery settle into his chest like a steady second heartbeat. Later, in the lamplit sitting room of his lodging in Frascati, he turns pages with linen-wrapped fingers, noting that quills paused often at the same subtle angle, suggesting a single scribe at leisurely work. He counts quires, essays pigments under a pocket lens, and sketches a quick collation on hotel stationery. The parchment appears younger than the illustrations first suggest. Surfaces smooth and lightly speckled, free of the heavy iron gall scoring common to medieval texts. He suspects an origin near the close of the European Renaissance, a moment when herbal medicine, alchemy, and astrological curiosity intertwined like vines across the thresholds of academic courtyards. Rumor soon spreads among rare book circles in Rome and Florence that the codex may link to Emperor Rudolph II of Bohemia, a sovereign famed for cabinets of curiosity and lavish stipends paid to occult thinkers. One letter preserved at the Starakishi National Bibliothek hints that Jacobus de Eipnik, imperial physician, signed a mysterious herbal written in unknown script. Voynich copies the citation carefully, his pen strokes even and deliberate, then mails inquiries to Prague archives, where archivists still organize shelves once overturned by war. Each reply arrives weeks later, bundled with wax seals and violet ink, offering small confirmations mixed with uncertain musings, each as gentle and opaque as the manuscript itself. Turn the parchment slowly and settle your gaze upon a leaf where vines curl in patient spirals, their stems widening into bulbs that resemble clear retorts, while petals unfurl in bands of celadon and deep carmine that breathe the essence of early spring. Veins spread like river deltas across each leaf, yet they flow toward geometric seeds that rest upon improbable stalks, never seen in meadow or marsh. Imagine yourself tracing a fingertip along this painted labyrinth and finding no familiar botanic pattern, only the quiet suggestion of an herbal language that whispers promises of distant gardens still hidden behind dawn mist. Another folio invites study beneath an ivory magnifier, revealing roots that twist into subtle knots around little pools of cobalt wash. Tiny nymph-like figures, palms turned upward, appear to guide sap through transparent stems toward blossoms shaped like five-pointed stars. At the lower margin, a series of dense glyphs marches in even cadence, as if recording recipes or prayers to coax these imagined plants toward full maturity. Some scholars sense echoes of classical herbals, others note echoes of Chinese materia medica, yet each comparison dissolves under the glow of mineral pigments that refuse ordinary translation. Turn farther, and a constellation chart emerges, a wheel divided into 12 chambers, gleaming with gold flecks. Within each segment, women recline upon crescent couches, eyes closed, limbs draped in robes dyed with verdigris and indigo. A slender serpent winds through 4 segments, weaving across painted constellations of Taurus and Libra, before dissolving into a cluster of silver dots that suggest the Milky Way. Celestial spheres nestle at the corners, each tinted slightly different, perhaps marking eclipses or the passage of Venus near morning dawn. The silent elegance invites calm study rather than urgent deciphering, much like a lullaby offered by distant night sky. Now enter the balneological section, where figures bathe in emerald pools set within delicate glass vessels that taper like tulips. The liquid shimmers under minuscule brushstrokes of white, giving the illusion of soft ripples disturbed by quiet laughter never heard. Some women stand waist-deep, passing ribbons between fingers, while others recline along terracotta basins whose rims curve into the shapes of scallop shells. Faint lines connect tubs like subterranean aqueducts, hinting at a hidden plumbing system, or perhaps spiritual waterways guiding humors through the body. The scene feels tranquil, a spa for the soul, wrapped in chromatic whispers of copper green and pale saffron. Adjacent pages hold dense fields of script broken by sudden starburst diagrams, each resembling a snowflake captured at full bloom. Beneath these bursts, smaller flowers crowd in orderly rows, their petals marked with numbers that may measure lunar days or degrees of planetary aspect. The scribe varies letter height subtly, creating visual rhythms that rise and fall like measured breathing. At times, a peculiar gallows-shaped character towers above the line, then dips again into flowing cursive, imparting a serene melody across the vellum. These visual cadences echo the rhythm of their lives as imagined by any future reader, coaxing the mind toward contemplative drift. Modern chemists, peering through microscopes under low lamplight, identify copper acetate in the greens, crushed lapis within the blues, and a delicate blush of hematite lending roses their subdued warmth. Ultraviolet scans reveal no corrections, no second hand, only the confident path of a single artist who mixed pigments with patience and perhaps whispered incantations while binding egg yolk to groundstone. Even at this forensic distance, the manuscript retains an aura of gentle devotion, each pigment grain offering a steady heartbeat from centuries past, smoothing the present moment with unhurried assurance. Finally, pause before a page where an entire landscape unfurls inside a single massive leaf, curled edges forming mountain ridges topped by tiny fortresses. Rivulets run through the veins, feeding circular ponds filled with sky-blue paint. At the leaf's base, text flows in a crescent arc, mimicking the curve of shoreline, suggesting navigation across inner continents only visible to seekers of quiet knowledge. Allow the image to settle behind your eyelids like a passing dream, soothing your thoughts just as the unknown scribe may have hoped centuries ago when quill first met parchment under silent candlelight. Picture a spring morning in 1918 at Riverbank Laboratories near the Fox River in Illinois. The grounds hum with birdsong, while young Officer William Friedman and his wife Elizabeth sit beneath tall maples. Pages of the strange manuscript spread across an outdoor bench that smells faintly of cedar oil. Nearby looms the grand house of eccentric patron George Fabian, whose whispers of German plots have lured the couple from quiet collegiate life into the realm of ciphers. William tests the text with Caesar shifts, grids, and sliding rulers carved from polished boxwood, yet each tool slips against the gentle curves of Voynich letters, like oars against mist. Even failures feel serene beneath the maple shade, for the code invites patience rather than haste and rewards every attentive moment with new patterns that shimmer just beyond reach. 3 years later, in a dim lecture hall at the University of Pennsylvania, classical scholar William Newbold clears his throat and reveals an audacious claim. He believes the script encodes microscopic Greek shorthand hidden within each looped character, visible only through powerful magnifiers. Students lean forward in rapt silence as lantern slides project enlarged letters upon a chalk-washed wall, showing minute squiggles that Newbold interprets as secret messages from Roger Bacon concerning telescopes and spiral galaxies. The theory blossoms in journals, calming wartime nerves with the promise that new knowledge often hides in plain sight. Only after Newbold's death will careful colleagues examine his notes and find that many microscopic marks are nothing more than cracks in aging vellum, gentle reminders that the lure of discovery can sometimes conjure vistas where none exist. During the 1930s and 40s, William Friedman returns to the puzzle. Between sessions of directing American code rooms, his approach is as measured as a metronome. Count each symbol, plot frequency curves, search for repeating sequences that may mark consonant clusters or calendar headings. He names glyph families with botanical ease, calling one figure gallows, another figure bench, labeling them only long enough to test fresh permutations. Despite triumph over enemy ciphers year after year, he closes each Voynich session with the same quiet conclusion: script still opaque, puzzle still kind, and perhaps deliberately constructed to resist every net of reason cast upon it. His resignation sounds gentle rather than bitter, as though the manuscript's silence offers its own calm counsel on the limits of mastery. Cold War years bring new voices. Linguist Mary D. Imperio traces letter relationships on delicate vellum overlays, classifying dialects within the text later dubbed Carrier A and Carrier B. After a devoted analyst at the National Security Agency, she listens to the rhythm of their lives within the script, noting that the earlier dialect uses shorter words. The later dialect favors repetitive suffixes, suggesting an evolving hand or a shift in subject matter. Her typewritten reports circulate quietly through government archives, soothing clerks on late shifts with their graceful phrasing. No explosive revelation dawns, yet each insight settles like a pebble in a clear pool, sending rings of gentle curiosity outward toward future scholars. Across the Atlantic, in Cambridge, scientist Gordon Rugg kneels beside sprawling sheets of cardboard covered with stencils shaped to Voynich glyphs. He tests the possibility of a medieval card template cipher, sliding perforated cards across grids of Latin syllables copied from herbal texts. Rain taps lightly on an old leaded window as he moves stencils with deliberate care, demonstrating that gibberish with statistical elegance can emerge from simple tools. The experiment neither proves nor disproves authorship, yet it restores humility, reminding onlookers that intricate puzzles do not always require clandestine magicians, only patient artisans and a scented candle burning low beside a wooden desk. Meanwhile, in Rome, physicist Marcello Montemurro applies information theory, mapping entropy variations through the manuscript like a cartographer humming along a coastline. Computer outputs blossom into color-coded heat maps, warm hues marking dense clusters of semantic weight, cooler tones waving through filler passages. Patterns emerge that resemble natural language despite the unbroken privacy of vocabulary, whispering that meaning may lurk within syntax, even if vocabulary remains cloaked. The gentle glow of monitor screens in a darkened lab mirrors candles long extinguished on a Renaissance worktable, linking modern algorithms to ancient ink in a chain of quiet persistence, unmarred by haste. So the centuries gather around a single enigma. Scholars from cipher bureaus, monasteries, data centers, and suburban dens passing the manuscript back and forth like a sleeping infant that stirs only occasionally, yet inspires enduring tenderness. Each investigator adds a careful stitch to a widening tapestry, bringing new color without tearing old cloth, and the codex continues to breathe in its glass case, welcoming every fresh question with the same calm poise it offered Wilfrid Voynich on that first Italian afternoon. In this slow convergence, we discern not frustration, but a lullaby of inquiry, coaxing the mind to rest amid gentle loops of ink that promise further secrets, while freeing the listener to dream. A gentle hum fills the conservation lab at the Beinicke Library, where soft white panels bathe the Voynich pages in steady light that never flickers. In 2009, technicians guide a sheet the color of toasted linen beneath a slender spectrometer nose, noting with calm satisfaction that radiocarbon counts place the vellum in the early 1500s. The result settles like a quiet sigh across the scholarly community, removing later forgeries from the field of possibility and allowing minds to rest upon a Renaissance dawn when ink still carried the faint aroma of gallnut and wine lees. On a monitoring screen, the parchment fibers appear as rolling hills under dawn light, each collegiate strand curving with patient certainty, confirming that time has touched the codex only with gentle hands. Next, a multispectral camera glides over the manuscript, casting beams that range from deep ultraviolet to warm infrared, revealing ghostly underdrawings and faded pinprick guide marks never seen by ordinary eyes. Vivid hues leap forth on the scientist's display, azure paths that once looked gray, saffron rings around blossoms, now bright as morning marigolds. The images stack into translucent layers, forming a quiet symphony of hidden strokes that speak of planning, of pauses, of a human pulse, steady yet curious. Conservators observe silent blemishes where smudged passages suggest a moment of hesitation by the scribe, perhaps a candle guttering beside the desk or an errant moth brushing wet ink. The manuscript offers no anxiety, only a deepening sense of shared breath across centuries. Across the Atlantic, data scientists at the University of Alberta feed the complete transcription of Voynich glyphs into neural networks that resemble patient librarians rather than impatient automatons, algorithms tuned to detect word boundaries in extinct scripts, whisper about clusters that behave like prefixes, about recurring terminal shapes that echo verb endings in Romance tongues. A soft chime marks each training epoch, like a teacher's bell, signaling the end of an exercise. Results float onto a projection wall, gentle pastel graphs showing entropy, valleys, and lexical plateaus. While no sudden decoding emerges, patterns align with natural language expectations, confirming that the text is not random noise, but a message delivered in subtle rhythm, waiting for ears that can hear its cadence. Computational linguists, inspired by these findings, craft synthetic grammars based on agglutinative logic, mapping gallows characters to markers of tense and mode. They test the grammars by generating strings, then compare them to actual lines from the manuscript, listening for echoes, much as a musician tunes a cello to a remembered pitch. When a generated phrase mirrors original spacing with uncanny grace, the room stills, researchers sharing the quiet pleasure of proximity to meaning. Even if final understanding remains elusive, those moments do not crack the cipher. Instead, they settle the spirit, reminding observers that progress can be as gentle as dew forming along garden leaves before dawn. In botany labs, digital herbarium teams align the codex plants with modern genetic trees, linking spiral bulb drawings to onion cultivars and star floret clusters to alpine asters. Using software that measures leaf symmetry, they overlay silhouettes of Voynich flora onto photos of living specimens, gauging deviation with calm detachment. Some overlays align within 5% tolerance, suggesting the artist stylized real roots, real stems, yet allowed imagination to bloom freely in petals and seed pods. The exercise feels less like a crime scene reconstruction and more like an afternoon stroll through a fragrant greenhouse where known fragrance mingles with a faint, unfamiliar sweetness, hinting at a cultivar that may once have grown in monastic plots, now reclaimed by forest. Meanwhile, cryptologists at the European Organization for Nuclear Research harnessed quantum annealing cores, letting qubits drift through vast search spaces where classical computers would stall for years. The machine rests in frozen silence, its superconducting loops deep within a steel cylinder, colder than outer space. While outside the chamber, technicians sip tea, their breaths forming small clouds in the chilled control suite. Hours later, the processor yields candidate keys that reduce perplexity by an elegant margin, but still leave glyphs intact, as if the codex politely declines complete revelation. Even at the frontier of physics, the manuscript retains composure, coaxing frantic innovation back toward contemplative patience. In the quiet that follows each new attempt, curators return the volume to its cradle. Pages parted just enough to release a faint parchment scent that blends with hint of walnut oil from the display case. Visitors lean over the glass, eyes soft with wonder, ears attuned to the barely audible murmur of air vents and distant footsteps. They read the curator's placard that concedes ongoing mystery, yet speaks of cumulative insight, and they feel a gentle hush settle upon thought, like a down blanket drawn at evening. The Voynich manuscript remains exactly where it has always wished to be, balanced between known and unknown, sustaining curiosity without strain, inviting every observer into a realm where puzzle and serenity walk hand in hand, guiding minds toward unhurried dreams beyond the library walls. Mystery number 4, The Enigma of Dyatlov Pass. 9 experienced hikers entered Russia's northern Urals in January 1959, and their frozen camp would be found weeks later, raising more questions than answers. Picture a January dawn in 1959 as the Sverdlovsk rail station exhales steam that curls above iron tracks like pale incense. 9 young hikers, Titan canvas packs beside the waiting carriage, breath rising in soft clouds that drift toward frosted lamps. Igor Dyatlov, engineering student and quiet leader, checks a battered journal already fragrant with cedar pitch. Around him, Zina Kolmogrova laughs over misbuttoned mittens. Rustem Slobodin secures a mandolin within a canvas sleeve, and Yuri Krivonishenko raises a tin mug of sweet tea that glows amber in first light. Snowdrifts rest upon the roof tiles of distant warehouses, yet the mood remains warm, a shared anticipation that small hardships will polish friendship into lasting memory. The train rumbles north along the spine of the Urals, passing birch groves whose trunks shine like rows of muted silver flutes. Inside a dim carriage, window panes flower with fern-shaped ice, and the group reads Pushkin aloud in turns, voices mingling with the steady rattle of wheels. Yuri Doroshenko sketches ridgeline contours into a pocket notebook, while Ludmila Dubanina traces travel timetables upon the fogged glass, leaving ghost maps that fade as condensation slides downward. Between verses, Zina hums a lullaby once taught by her grandmother, a tune that settles into the carriage air with the ease of drifting snow, soothing fellow passengers who lean back and close their eyes. They disembark at Ivdel under a violet sky, footprints squeaking across packed snow toward a waiting lorry that smells of pine tar and diesel. Locals in quilted coats offer bread heavy with rye and caraway, nodding in silent respect toward the stamped hiking permits each student carries. During the jolting drive to Visay, headlights cut narrow tunnels through forest where branches droop under powder, glistening like chandeliers in the muted glow. The passengers sway gently, their conversation reduced to murmurs, each remark absorbed by thick fur collars. When the lorry halts at a shuttered cooperative store, they unload calmly, mindful that routine builds warmth faster than any fire. First camp rises beside the Lozva River, where twilight paints the snowfield rose and lilac, before surrendering to deep cobalt. Igor assigns tasks with subdued authority, to gather spruce boughs, to carve passages through crusted drifts, while Nikolai Thibault, Brignoles, arranges a small fire that crackles like distant applause. Supper simmers in a battered pot, a quiet stew of buckwheat, pork fat, and dried mushrooms that perfumes the still air with earthy comfort. After the meal, they sit in a circle, gloves drying on sticks, and Rustam brings forth the mandolin, coaxing slow chords that blend with the river's muffled current under ice. Stars emerge one by one, bright and patient, reflecting upon the polished shafts of their ski poles. Diary entries from this night capture simple pleasures. Igor notes the calm hiss of snow settling from overloaded branches. Ludmila jokes about her eternal search for missing mittens, and Zina sketches tiny faces of fellow travelers. Beside a column labeled Morel, they speak of exams postponed, of families who promised warm welcomes in spring, and of the challenge grade that awaits upon successful completion of this arduous trek. Each word on the thin blue-lined paper carries gentle anticipation, yet none hint at apprehension. The temperature slides toward 20 below, but laughter drifts from the tent flaps like warm smoke that refuses to freeze. Days pass in measured rhythm. Skis glide over frozen swamps where reed stalks stand imprisoned in crystal. Poles click upon ice with a metronome steadiness, and distant peaks appear across the tree line, their flanks washed in pale gold when the low sun grazes the horizon. They pause often to sip sweetened tea from shared flasks, savoring hints of lemon rind stored since New Year's celebrations. Camera shutters snap quietly, capturing fur-trimmed hoods dusted with frost and eyelashes crusted in delicate white. At night, they draft route sketches under candle glow, the wax pooling in slow spirals, while outside the wind combs the forest with a whisper that never rises to fearsome roar. On the 1st of February, they reach a broad saddle near Mount Kolat Syakhl, a bare slope swept clean by steady wind where stunted birch give way to open tundra. Decision comes gently. Rather than descend into the lie for shelter, they pitch a single large tent upon the incline to practice night navigation in exposed conditions. Stakes sink into crust with muffled crunch, guy lines tighten, and the canvas billows briefly before settling under twin ski pole supports. Inside, canvas walls glow amber from a solitary lamp, casting soft halos upon notebooks, felt boots, and neat rows of wool socks hung to dry. Igor records, barometer steady, wind moderate, spirits high. Evening meal feels subdued, yet content. The pot emits slow bubbles, releasing aromas of canned meat and garlic, while outside the wind hums against stretched canvas like a distant organ chord sustained in solemn worship. They speak of reaching the Otorten Ridge tomorrow, of sunrise painting sheer cliffs in apricot light, of gliding back south with renewed vigor. Diaries close with routine lines, weather noted, distance logged, gratitude expressed for simple warmth. Zipper tongues click, fabric sighs, and the last candlewick surrenders to darkness, leaving 9 steady heartbeats monitoring the quiet slope. Far above, the aurora unfurls silent banners of pale jade that ripple across the night, unobserved yet gentle, blessing the camp with silent luminescence, until cloud banks drift in to veil the sky. Thus the stage settles, serene and measured, upon the icy canvas of the northern Urals. The travelers sleep wrapped in shared trust, unaware that their final recorded breaths weave now with the soft hush of falling snow. Diaries rest beside mittens, each page a tender whisper that live endeavors are often preserved in simple lines, and the rhythm of their lives joins the vast cadence of winter, slow and soothing, guiding even distant listeners toward reflective calm. 11 days after radio silence sets in, the Ural Polytechnic Institute dispatches a modest search team that grows with each bend in the forest road, drawing local Mansi trackers, volunteer students, and a Red Army pilot whose biplane purrs above endless sweeps of fir and larch. On the 26th of February, the aircraft circles a pale slope near Kholat Syakhl, where a dark shape breaks the perfect white. Ground crews ski the final rise and reach a canvas ridge tent half buried in rime. Its guy ropes still anchored, its entrance flap sealed by drifted snow. A long slit cleaves one wall from eave to floor, cotton edges neatly parted as though trimmed by careful scissors rather than torn by wind. Inside, sleeping bags lie arranged in order, boots stand in pairs. A flask of cocoa tilts beside a small stove yet to be lit, and a diary waits open upon a map, the ink crisp, the handwriting serene. It feels like the hikers stepped away only minutes ago, leaving the air faintly scented with smoked pork and pine resin. Rescuers follow a line of shallow tracks leading downslope toward a distant tree line, each print no deeper than a bird bath, despite recent snowfall, suggesting methodical retreat rather than headlong flight. Prints appear in single file, some barefoot, some clad only in socks, others marked by felt slippers, all sinking evenly into crusted powder that sparkles under low sun. No chaos of wider trampling surrounds the tent. No scuffed snow betrays scuffle or struggle, only that quiet procession fading into dwarf, cedar, and stone birch. At a distance of 500 paces, the trail meets a tall cedar where branches hang stripped high above reach, bark scarred by climbing hands. Beneath the tree lie two companions side by side, beside remnants of a small fire, their cotton undershirts dusted with ash, their faces turned gently toward the embers as though listening for a final crackle. Nearby rest fragments of birch, twig, and a pocket knife snapped at the hinge, evidence of calm yet urgent labor to coax flame in bitter cold. 3 bodies appear next on the open slope between cedar and tent, each at a different distance, each facing a different angle, as if navigating back toward shelter by measured stages. Igor Dyatlov rests with one hand clutching a birch branch, his journal pouch still strapped across one shoulder, his expression soft, lips parted as though mid-thought. Rustem Slobodin lies farther uphill, snow drifted against his wool trousers, one boot missing, his mandolin safe in the tent above, its strings now hushed. Zina Kolmogorova is discovered nearest to the tent, coat dusted with rimed crystals, arms folded across her chest within a final embrace against the penetrating wind. Their postures speak not of panic, but of endured fatigue, each halted by draining cold rather than sudden violence. their final footprints still clear enough for searchers to trace with gloved fingertips. An inquiry commission assembles in Sverdlovsk during the thaw of 1959, meeting within a stark government building where polished parquet floors reflect pale window light. Colonel Lev Ivanov presides with steady demeanor, his fountain pen gliding across cream paper as he records witness statements from search volunteers and geologists. Imagine yourself seated near the back, the quiet rustle of wool coats creating a soft undertone as each speaker recounts snowfall depths, compass bearings, and the muted scent of smoke that lingered near the cedar tree. No dramatic revelation arises, only the tranquil rhythm of testimony punctuated by the occasional clink of teacups. Autopsy tables at Ivdel Morgue stand beneath shaded bulbs that cast diffused halos upon waxed linen sheets. Forensic physician Boris Vazrazdeny notes frost crystallization along eyelashes, minor abrasions upon knuckles, and deeper internal damage in 2 cases where rib cages appear compressed. He writes in measured prose, attributing trauma to heavy snow slabs rather than weapons, and observes that skin displays faint bronze hues, typical of prolonged cold exposure. The tone remains clinical and calm, avoiding speculation while acknowledging that final moments likely unfolded swiftly, sparing prolonged suffering. Laboratory technicians in Moscow later unfold parcels of retrieved garments, laying them gently upon white porcelain trays before Geiger counters that tick with subdued patience. Readings rise modestly above background on 2 samples, numbers high enough to earn margin notes, yet low enough to avoid alarm. Scientists attribute the presence to, or dust common in the region, or perhaps lantern mantles treated with thorium. An explanation scribbled in the margin with steady hand. Files slide into buff envelopes stamped confidential, then rest in steel cabinets where hinges close with polite click rather than clang. Investigators review campsite photographs projected onto a linen screen that flutters slightly from radiator breezes. They note stovepipe stored unlit, camera, tripod forgotten at tent entrance, yet nothing suggests intrusion. Colonel Ivanov writes that natural force combined with poor visibility forced the hikers from shelter. An official conclusion that reads almost like a lullaby of cause and effect. Years slip by and the archive door remains locked under modest guard, its key resting in a desk drawer lined with violet felt. Only in the 1990s, when wider glasnost breezes drift through old ministries, do journalists leaf through yellow folders and discover pages scented faintly of cedar and ink. They find no sinister signatures, only careful charts of snow density, sketches of ravine topology. Today, replicas of those documents rest beneath museum glass in Yekaterinburg, their typed Cyrillic softened by warm display lighting. Visitors lean close, hearing only the gentle whir of climate control and trace lines that plot the hiker's final route in calm arcs across faded grid paper. No alarms ring, no secret code leaps from margins, only the quiet echo of diligent civil service carried out beneath winter skies. The mind, lulled by this subdued diligence, drifts naturally toward acceptance that some archives exist not to reveal sensational twists, but to cradle memory in ordered pages, preserving the rhythm of past lives with unembellished care. Long after search parties lowered their flags, the slope near Kholat Syakhl sleeps beneath fresh blankets of snow. Yet gentle voices of inquiry drift across its silence like winter wind weaving through cedar needles. Imagine yourself beside a low fire in a mountain refuge where researchers gather after dusk, tea steaming in tin cups, maps spread upon pine boards. The theory rests with soothing plausibility, offering cause without malice, rhythm without chaos. Another quiet proposal floats from acousticians who study infrasound, those deep vibrations below the register of human hearing that mountains sometimes sculpt from steady gale. Laboratory chambers recreate Helmholtz resonance within tent fabric, producing pulses felt rather than heard, a subtle trembling that unsettles balance and nudges instinct toward flight. The idea comforts by framing tragedy as nature's soft whisper rather than any sudden roar. Engineers examine slab avalanche mechanics, noting that shallow layers of cohesive snow resting upon fragile crystals can release with little sound, sliding only a few meters, yet delivering force ample enough to bruise ribs through quilted parkas. Such a slide might bury boots and stoves, yet leave tent partly visible, prompting measured evacuation and remote bivouac until daylight. Some voices recall Soviet rocket tests rumbling across remote skies that same winter, citing fragments of molten metal found by hunters years later. Yet, declassified launch logs list no flights near Otorten, and diaries mention no thunder, only steady wind. The missile tail drifts like powder blown from distant peaks, interesting but light, leaving no firm imprint upon the calm surface of evidence. Equally ethereal are tales of Yeti or secret gulag guards, stories that rise in late-night taverns, yet fade with dawn's sober clarity. They persist because human rest cradles itself in narrative, and sensational twists sparkle briefly before settling as fine snow over more grounded possibilities. In 2019, Russian investigators return with drones and thermal sensors. Their final report citing a small slab slide triggered by wind shear and snow creep, aligned with modern simulations from Swiss avalanche institutes. Documentary crews film gentle-scale models where beads of plastic snow slide across tilted glass under lamplight, recreating conditions in miniature while a narrator murmurs soft statistics. The conclusion, though not absolute, feels kind. It paints an image of seasoned hikers acting with competence, making rational choices within a fluid environment that shifted quietly beneath them. Responsibility rests with no person, only with the ever-present dialogue between mountain, weather, and time. Today, a modest plaque stands near the tree line, its Cyrillic letters warmed by midsummer sun and frosted by winter moon, bearing the 9 names in neat order. Visitors leave woven bracelets, folded notes, and small carved skis, tokens that flutter in mountain breeze like gentle chimes. Standing there, you may feel more serenity than sorrow, sensing that the hiker's final journey has joined the wider rhythm of alpine seasons. Snow falls, melts, and falls again, each cycle smoothing sharp angles, inviting minds to rest within acceptance that some questions glow softly without sharp edges, guiding reflection rather than demanding resolution. With that gentle glow, we close our exploration, letting the snow settle undisturbed, and invite your thoughts to drift, calm and unhurried, into the quiet night beyond.